Good morning. I was just checking on our drummer. Apparently he fell off the stage. Did you see that? I had my eyes closed. I was worshiping. Randy, I'm glad you're all right, man. You almost died worshiping, so I appreciate that. Man, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing to name Jesus. No, okay, that's just a dangerous thing to rock out on the stage with no lip. All right. Hey, everybody, if we haven't met, my name's Dave. Some of you might know this, but right after I graduated from college, I spent about a year and a half in the lovely island of Oahu in Hawaii. And so I lived there for about a year and a half, and I would say without hesitation and without hyperbole, every single Saturday, a group of me and my friends from Hawaii would go, and we would go find the best waves that we could, and we would boogie board. Now, we would not surf. Surfing is for, that's a whole other level up there. But boogie boarding is it's what you're looking for is shore break and these, waves. And here's the thing about it. In the summer, the waves are just okay. But in the winter, when the winds come, boy, it's amazing. Let me show you where the best point to body surf is. It's right there at kind of the point where all the winds kind of go. And there's this beach there called Makapu'u. Say Makapu'u. Say it with me. It's just fun to say. It's a beautiful location, and most of the time the waves are about this big. They're about a foot or two. You would call this number, and they had the surf report, and they would say 0 to 1 feet, 1 to 2 feet, 2 to 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet. Never really got bigger than that. Now here's the thing I did not know. You think a 1 foot wave, it's not really that impressive, right? But if you remember back in math, and I'm not going to spend too much time on math because I hate it, but here it is. If you think about a wave, it goes like this. So a 1 foot wave actually has a 1 foot face and then a 1 foot trough. So it's actually a 2 foot wave, right? Now you would think, well, that's not, but when you're actually in the water, you're not standing on anything. You're in the water, so it's 2 feet above you. That's a fairly substantial amount of water that can move you. It's very fun. But sometimes in the winter, those numbers would get a lot bigger. It wouldn't be 1 to 2. And one time, my buddy Henry called me up and he's like, we're going to Makapu'u. Get ready. It's 3 to 4 foot waves. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. I have no idea what that means. So I went out there like a fool, and like a guy from Ohio. I will remind you, not a lot of shore break in Ohio. We have a lake. It's a great lake, not an ocean. So anyway, I go out there, and it's 4 foot waves. And the first thing you do when you go to do boogie boarding, you sit on the beach and you watch the waves for 20 minutes. That's the rule for the locals. You sit, you put your stuff down, you watch for 20 minutes because you got to see what the sets are like. And they're 4 foot waves, which are kind of, and again, 4 foot face, 4 foot trough. That's 8 feet. That's a lot of water. That's a mass of water. And so we're watching. And I go out there and I'm like, I'm going to wait for a good wave, and you put your surf, there's surf flips. They're like little flippers that are smaller than scuba flippers. They're hard, and so because you got to paddle against the currents. Even Michael Phelps couldn't outswim these currents. They're really strong. And so you're there, and I see this wave, and I'm like, I'm going to catch it. And what you do is you catch it, you paddle really fast, and then you skid down the face of it. It's a lot of fun. But the problem was, as I got picked up by this wave, it was so high. 8 feet higher than this, right? I'm looking down, and I'm like, wow, that is I'm high up, and I can see the rocks, I can see the sand, I can see my life ending right here. Tell my mother I love her. It's just like this, and I stopped paddling. Now, when you stop paddling, you don't go down the face of the wave. It just takes, and this is pretty much live footage of me. It just takes you, and it just, boom, it just throws you down, and the whole wave just kind of falls right on top of you, and you're in this spin cycle. And I remember being under this water, and this is so much water, and it's so much water, and I had no idea. I was so tumbled, I had no idea which way was the surface, and so which way was up, which way was down. So I began to kick furiously to try to get to the surface, because I was like, I took a big breath, but I was like, I got to get to the surface. There's big waves coming in. And so I kicked as hard as I could, and then I wound up with just a face full of sand, because I kicked the wrong direction. I thought that up was down and the down was up. And it turned out okay. I turned around, I pushed off the bottom, I shot up to the top. I was fine, I lived. But I got to the shore, and they were all laughing at me, all the locals. They're like, that was something. The point is, in that moment, I thought that up was down and that down was up. and I was confused. And that had almost had some pretty tragic consequences, thinking that up was down and down was up. As we've been marching through the book of Matthew, I don't know if you've noticed, but there have been so many times where Jesus has said things and taught things and tried to reveal things to show us that what we think is up is actually down, and what we think is down is actually up. Jesus has a very different value system, a very different way of looking at life. And for Jesus, time after time after time, he keeps saying to us, and it says, he's basically saying, please listen. Down is up and up is down. And I'm going to redefine these things. Today we come to a passage in Matthew 20, and I feel like I don't mean to be hyperbolic on this. It seems like every week I say to you, this is the most intense passage I've ever read. And it feels like that, right? Because he's redefining so much. But this really is one of the most intense passages I've ever read. And this is really difficult. In fact, it's so difficult that as I was working through it this week, I realized to my core, I do not believe Jesus. I don't. Our culture is so strong and so loud on what Jesus is about to redefine that I find it very difficult to believe Jesus. But of course, you know that I must. And we are a people of not only the word, but we're people who try to follow Jesus. And so when he says something, we have to try to let it sink in and to live it out. I'm going to read the whole passage. It's in Matthew 20. And then we're going to go through this. And you're going to see. And then we have three things we're going to hone in on to highlight. So here's the passage. Matthew 20, starting in verse 17. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. And on the way, he took the 12 aside and said to him, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they've been prepared by my Father. And when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. And Jesus called them together and said, I added that sigh. That's not in the text. You can almost hear it. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So a number of thoughts and observations. First off, holy tiger mom, Batman. This mom approaches Jesus with a heck of a request. And it's on the tails of Jesus saying, hey, I'm going to go to Jerusalem and get killed. Now, if she had come to Jesus and bowed at his feet and fallen down and said, listen, Jesus, don't go. Don't go. They're going to kill you. And you're the wisest, best man we've ever met. Why? Don't do that. Or she might have said, Jesus, listen, I know your mom, Mary. Think about what you will do to her heart if you get killed. I know what I would do if my sons got killed, or her heart would be broken. Don't go to Jerusalem. Think of what it would do to your mother. Or she might have said, listen, if they're going to kill you, I know what they're going to do to your followers. Think about my boys. They're going to get killed. Any of these things would have made some sense. But that is not what she says. What does she say? She says this, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in the kingdom. These are positions of power and honor, authority. Think about a king and a throne, right? Whoever's sitting on his left and his right, these are very, very, very powerful people. She's like, listen, can my sons be A1 and A2 in your kingdom? Like she is hoping that her sons will be elevated because all she has seen are kingdoms on earth. And in kingdoms on earth, this is how things work, right? This is the same as today, right? There's powerful people and whoever's near them, and you got a king and you got the court, and then you've got the middle class, and then you've got the plebeians, and you got the lowest of the low, right? That's the way kingdoms work. This is what she asks, for her sons to have positions of honor. This is kind of an insane. Did you not just hear that he said he was going to die? But before we judge too harshly, what James, what John, what their mom wants is the same thing that you and I want. It's the same thing we strive for. This idea of greatness. There's a guy by the name of Alfred Adler. He's also often called the father of modern psychology. He and this Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung are like the three kind of pillars. But what happened is, as time went on, Freud and Jung, their perspectives and their ideas actually became less and less out of favor. It's like, hey, Freud, not everything's about sex, all right? Maybe it is for you. You've got some issues. But not everything is. But Adler's ideas about psychology have actually been more and more studied, and they've taken on more, not just popularity, but studying. Here's what he said. He says that humans are so social. This is a quote from him. Humans are social beings, and therefore all behavior is socially embedded and has social meaning. This means that the contending to be seen, to be noticed, to be valued, that is the dominant impulse that drives human behavior. This is what Adler says. He says we're such social beings that to be seen and to be valued in our community, wherever that is, that drives us. Now, to embed the spiritual language on that, Dr. Martin Luther King, in a famous sermon called The Drum Major Instinct, put it this way. He talked about how we all have a desire to be the drum major. You know the drum major, right? The front of the parade, the guy with the silly hat and the baton, and he's high stepping marching. You know what I'm talking about? Everyone's paying attention to him. He's leading everything. This is what Dr. Martin Luther King said. He said it's kind of a drum major instinct, a desire to be out front, a desire to lead the parade, a desire to be first. And it's something that runs the whole gamut of life. And so before we condemn them, he's preaching in this about James and John in this passage. Let us see that we all have the drum major instinct. We all want to be important, to surpass others, to achieve distinction, to lead the parade. This is all of us. Nobody says, I want to grow up to be insignificant and lead a meaningless life. Nobody says this. And think about the whole gamut of life. I love the way that King says that. Think about this. Think about children. When children are born, what do? They cry out, pay attention to me. Right? Pay attention to me. And then they become toddlers. You ever been at a pool with a toddler? When a toddler jumps in, what's the thing they always turn and say to their parents? What do they say? Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Mom, Dad, look at me. Look at me. It's like, I'm looking. But do you see what they're saying? Boys and girls alike, right? Pay attention. Pay attention. And then teenagers. It doesn't go away with teenagers, does it? I have a teenage girl. Last night, she had a fall party with 4 of her friends, or 5 teenage girls, in my house. They made like pumpkin cookies and like ghost pizzas where they take the dough and make it into the shape of a ghost. Very cute. And they disappeared for about 30 minutes because they were all making TikToks. Right? What are they doing? What are they saying? It's like, hey, look at me. Right? Pay attention to me. There's something funny or interesting or cute that I'm doing. And it doesn't just disappear with high schoolers, does it? With adolescents. Anybody know an adult that likes to shine the light on themselves a little? Hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. Just a reminder, I'm important and interesting. I've got a good friend, David Kim, and he wrote a book, and he was preaching at Saratoga, and he came out, and he was preaching, and then he came down, and some people were greeting him, and a woman comes up and goes, I just want to thank you for your book. It really meant a lot to me. It really changed me. And David's book, Made to Belong, is fantastic. It talks about the 5 ways that community is formed. It's formational in the way that we think about community, even at our church. We recommend it. We live out the principles. It's really, really powerful. And so David is feeling really good. He's like, man, my book mattered. This is really awesome. And then the person said, man, that book, Analog Church, really rocked me. Now, Analog Church was written by J. Kim. And again, I don't know if you know this, but David Kim and J. Kim are not the same person. And so David just said, thank you. I accept that compliment. We all have a desire to be great, right? We all do. And what I find interesting in this passage is Jesus does not get mad at James and John or their mother for this request. He does not stop them. He doesn't say, that's a wrong impulse. You shouldn't have that. Instead, what he says is, you don't understand, and he calls them together to correct them. Because they don't understand. He even says, you don't know what you're asking. They don't understand yet something important about the kingdom. They know how kingdoms and hierarchies work. But in this moment, what Jesus is doing is he's not saying don't go for greatness. He's redefining what greatness is. And this redefinition is so shocking and so countercultural to the ancient world and to us today that it's worth paying attention to. These are Jesus' words again. Let's pause and read them again. This is a time for correction. Jesus calls them together and said, you know the rulers of the Gentiles. They lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. This is intentional language. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus redefines greatness. You want to be great? Be great at serving. Now, this is not just difficult. It's very, very difficult. But there's also an incredible edge of hope. Because in the ancient world, if you wanted to be great, you had to be born to positions of power or influence or work your way up. In this definition, who can be great? Anybody. Because anybody can serve. Anybody can be great in the kingdom of God. Do you see how flat this is? Do you see how beautifully invitational? Anyone can be great because anyone can serve. And that's God's measure. Not fame, not money, not Instagram clicks, not political power. Greatness is in how you serve and who you serve. A thought real quick as I was reflecting on this. He talks about the way the world works. The Gentiles lord it over them. They exercise authority. Is that too different than our Bay Area? Than our nation? I don't think so. There's a thing in the Bay Area we talk about all the time about ladder climbing. Here's the problem with ladder climbing, and you know this. I stole this picture from, I typed in ladder climbing stock photo. This is what came up. Isn't that fun? Even in Google, they know that this is about competition, making sure that you're on top and that others are not. The problem with ladder climbing, and you know this and you've seen this, maybe you've lived it, maybe you're tempted by it just as I am, it leads to using people for your own benefit, doesn't it? It leads to being self-centered. And weirdly enough, it leads to chronic insecurity. Because how do you know when you've arrived, right? Are you ever high enough? Is there ever anything secure? This does real damage to people's souls. And this is, I would say, the environment that we live in the Bay Area. From my conversations pastorally with so many people, men and women who are living this. It even goes down so far as teenagers. Teenagers have a sense that they need to climb and achieve. Teenagers feel like they need to climb and achieve. You see how tragic that is? There's a problem with it. You also walk into a room, and instead of thinking about, when you're ladder climbing, you walk into a room and you're instantly looking for people who can help you climb. And what happens to the people who are in that room who can't help you climb? How do you treat them? How do you see them? Like, it's worthless, right? You're no good to me. And what happens if somebody helps you climb to the next ladder, but then they can't help you to the next rung, right? They're discarded. Do you see? This is insidious. And maybe some of you have seen this. Maybe some of you have seen this in your businesses or the way that people live. And this is horrible. This does real damage not only to the people around you, I think, but it does damage to you. to us. Okay, but Jesus says, I love these words. 4 words, not so with you. You see what Jesus is saying? There's something to be different. And this is our third and final point, is that this is not just a teaching for Jesus. Jesus isn't just going to say some nice words and then go on his way. As with almost all of Jesus' teaching, he's not just going to say it, he's going to show it. He's going to model it. And boy, howdy is he. There's this moment, and I want to talk about this because this is kind of a strange thing, and it might be a little confusing. Jesus says, when James and John's mom asks him, hey, can we have the seats on the right and the left? Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. And then he says this phrase, can you drink the cup I'm about to drink? We can, they answered. And then Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit in my right or left is not for me to grant. I want to talk about that phrase, drink from the cup that I'm about to drink from. Because there's a key here to show what Jesus is about to do and who he is, and how he's not just going to talk about being a servant, but live it out. So, we're going to do a quick survey of some Old Testament ways that the cup is used in scriptures. Now, last week I did a lab on the prophets. We had 150, 160 people show up, and we just went through the prophets. This was unbelievable, incredible night, super fun. So every time we do that, you're invited and show up. It's so much fun to just really just dive into the word and just stay there, and it's just so much fun. So I'm going to show you a couple ways that the cup is used in scriptures. And then I want you to ask yourself, is this a good cup or a bad cup? Is this a cup I want to drink or a cup I don't want to drink? Ready? Psalm 16, written by David. Let me read this. Keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. So, good cup or bad cup? Good cup. Yeah, drink this one, right? This is a good cup. Psalm 23, famous psalm, right? By David. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Good cup or bad cup? Good cup, yeah, good cup. Psalm 117 by David. What shall I return to the Lord for all his goodness to me? I will lift up the cup of salvation, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. Good cup or bad cup? They're really good. This is a cup of salvation. This is my. And so in the Old Testament, the cup. I love the way the King James says it. My cup. In the NIV, it's my cup overflows. You know what it says in the King James? My cup runneth over. Doesn't that just sound great? It feels very biblical. It's not. It just feels regal. My cup runneth over, right? In the Old Testament, the cup that David refers to again and again is the goodness of God. And I don't just mean material possessions. It's about more than that, right? It's about God's presence. And then you saw at the end his protection, his salvation. This is how the cup is sometimes used in the Old Testament, but it's not the only way it's used. And to talk about this, I'm going to talk about 2 passages in Isaiah and Jeremiah where this cup is referred to. But in order to understand this, I'm going to take 30 seconds and talk about when and where Isaiah and Jeremiah taught and spoke. I have a little graph here. So Isaiah, what happens is in 975, the kingdom split. And there's these 10 northern tribes, and they go their own way. And they say, we're not really into this worship of Yahweh. We're going to worship these other gods. And then there's these 2 southern tribes named Judah, and they say, actually, we're going to try to stay with Yahweh. Well, what happens is God sends prophet after prophet after prophet to the Isaiah, to the 10 northern tribes, and they never turn, and they get worse, and they get hardened. And so in 722, this nation named Assyria comes, and God actually says that he sends them to pronounce judgment on their idolatry. And then what happens is Judah is like, nanny, nanny, boo, boo, like the younger brother, like, ha, ha, ha. And God's like, listen, y'all not much better. In fact, you guys are heading down a dark area. And so in 586, another nation called Babylon, God sends them to conquer the 2 southern tribes. And in these passages, what we see again and again is 2 things keep popping up. Number 1, idolatry or adultery to God, who should have been their king. and should have been, God uses terms of adultery, like you have betrayed your spouse. But then something else happens. When this adultery happens, injustice flares up all over. And the way that people treat each other is horrific. It's outside the way that God's created us. Think about you as a parent. There's two things that make parents just flip their lid. One is disrespect to them, right? And like, oh, you're not my dad, or they treat you like, but the other is when like one sibling hits another and mistreats them, you're like, oh, no, right? These are two things that like flare up parents, and this is what's going on. So let me show you where all the prophets are. There's so many prophets that kind of come in. I've given some rough dates of when they come in. Isaiah's there in the southern kingdom, and then Jeremiah is right there before the exile. And this is what Isaiah said. He's kind of first. He's kind of the prototype. And he is preaching to the southern kingdom, and he sees what's coming of the Assyrians of the north. And this is what he says to the southern tribes, okay? Awake, awake, rise up, Jerusalem, you who have drunk from the hand of the Lord, from the cup of his wrath, you who have drained to its dregs the goblet that makes people stagger. This is what your sovereign Lord says, your God who defends his people. See, I have taken out of your hand the cup that made you stagger, and from that cup, the goblet of my wrath, you will never drink again. So good cup or bad cup? Bad. Is it a good thing that God's removed this cup? Isaiah has preached to the king and said, you need to turn back to Yahweh. You cannot trust in political allegiances, because for God's people, their hope and their trust does not come from political situations. It comes from trusting in Yahweh, who will defend and protect his people. This is a bad cup. And then later on, Jeremiah is living in a crisis period in his nation. Babylon is marching on the two southern tribes, and Jeremiah is actually called by God to proclaim messages of reproof and solemn predictions of gloom over God's people for their increased and hard-hearted disobedience. And this is what Jeremiah says. He has this vision, this dream, and God says to him in this dream, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, said to me. And God has this cup. He says, take from my hand this cup filled with the wine of my wrath, and make all the nations to whom I send you drink it. And when they drink it, they will stagger and go mad because of the sword I will send among them. Good cup or bad cup? Real bad. Okay, so we got these two cup images, right? The beautiful ones of David, and then the prophets have this other cup, right? So which cup is it? I mean, I love when Jesus is like, can you drink the cup I'm about to drink? What do James and John quickly say? Yeah, we can. And then Jesus is like, I don't think you get it. I think they might think, oh, yeah, we can drink the cup. The cup of salvation, the cup of joy and blessing, right? Maybe that one. Or maybe they're thinking, yeah, there's probably some sacrifice, and we've shown our allegiance to you. I don't know what they're thinking, but they answer rather quickly. But again, remember our central premise. In God's kingdom, Jesus' teachings, up is down and down is up. And so what we're going to see is something shocking and incredible in the life of Jesus. We're not there yet. We're going to get there as we march through Matthew. But we're going to see something incredible. Down is up and up is down. In Jesus, the cup of suffering actually becomes the cup of salvation. So there's another time that Jesus references a cup. You might be familiar with it. Remember at the Last Supper? We talk about this every time we take communion. Jesus says he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. Do you see the imagery of Jeremiah there? But it's a different sort of cup. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from the fruit of this vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Good cup or bad cup? Great cup. But this is a different sort of cup. This is God pouring out himself, and this is a cup of forgiveness of sins. And then later on, a couple verses later, Jesus is in the garden. You see him fall on his face, sweat blood, and what does he cry out to his Father? Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground. This is Jesus. And he prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but you. But as you will. Good cup or bad cup? Bad cup. See, what happens in this moment is Jesus is going to drink the cup Now, in the prophets, the cup that the people earned was consistent disobedience to God. Adultery, idolatry over here, and then deep injustice that malformed their character because they were not rooted in who God was. They were not exhibiting his character or his righteousness. And so there's this darkness, and as a result of that, they had earned the logical result of that life. When you say to God, no thank you, when you walk away, is horrible things. In this case, it's breaking the covenant. And God has said, you break the covenant. If you don't want to be my God, that's fine. But if you don't want to be my people and you don't want me to be your God, that's fine. But it is not going to be fun. It will be destruction and terror. I want you to know the way with me is life. And I will not let this stand. I will not let this idolatry or adultery stand. I won't let you mistreat your brothers and sisters. I'm not going to stand for that. My judgment will come. And it will fall on you. And Jesus says, that cup that humanity earned, that bad cup, that cup of wrath, what does Jesus say he'll do? He'll drink it. And what will happen as a result of him drinking it? A new cup will be given to us. And what is that cup? The forgiveness of sins and life everlasting. The cup of salvation. Jesus drinks one cup, and as a result, the cup changes and shifts to become the cup of salvation for us. This is how one of the primary ways that Jesus serves humanity. It might be the primary way that Jesus serves humanity. Because he does for us what we could never do for ourselves. He drinks a cup of suffering, the cup of judgment, and he drinks it himself for the forgiveness of our sins. So that we might drink another cup, the cup of salvation that David talked about, the cup of blessing. He does for us what we could never do. And this is what he says. Look what he says. He says, just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And then what's the clause right after that? And give his life as a ransom for many. To buy us. The word ransom is to buy us out of slavery, to provide. We have been kidnapped and enslaved, and he's going to pay for that to get us out. This is how one of the primary ways, if not the primary way, that Jesus serves us, serves humanity, serves his people. But there's one more aspect to it. How does Jesus drink this cup? And this is fascinating. This is something Jay pointed out to me that I didn't quite get. And he's like, no, look at this, look at this. Look at what James and John's mother requests. She says this, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and your left in your kingdom. This term, right and left. And he says, you don't know what you're asking. And then Jesus says, yes, you actually will drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong for whom they've been prepared for by my Father. Can you think of another time when Jesus had someone on his right and on his left? In Luke 23, as Jesus is being crucified, Luke tells us these details. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with Jesus to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, Golgotha, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And one of the criminals who hurled insults at him, aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminals rebuked him. Don't you fear God? Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. When does Jesus drink the cup of suffering? When does he become king? In this moment. This is his coronation. Shocking, a death. But why is he dying? To drink the cup of suffering, to drink the cup of judgment. He drinks it so that we might be free, so that we might live. Matthew Reeves, in his wonderful commentary on Matthew from Zondervan, put it this way. I love this quote. He's talking about the Jeremiah tie, the cup that we drink. He says, the difference with Jesus, of course, was his willingness to take the cup and drink it himself, not only for Israel's sake, but for the whole world. Unlike Jeremiah, Jesus would force it on nobody. He knew he was destined to drink the cup, even though he didn't want to. This is how Jesus serves humanity. We deserve this. This cup, we deserve to drink it. And God knows if we drink it, we're done. We're over. And he can't deal with that. So Jesus says, I'll drink it. And the Trinity, together in perfect unity, Jesus willingly decides to go, to drink this for us. And in doing so, gains us a different cup. So my friends, how do we live this out? How do we live out this radical life of service? Because Jesus didn't just teach this, guys. He modeled this. I believe he deserves to be listened to. I believe he deserves to have his will done. I believe he deserves to have us really think about what it means to be great. And to not be confronted by the reality of this Bay Area, but the reality of Jesus' words. This is hard work. If I present that I somehow understand this or believe it, I don't. I'm really, really trying hard to work on this. But there's a couple ways I was thinking about this week. How do we live as servants? As you know, next week we have something called Beautiful Day. There's a team of people who for the past year have been working to put together service projects to help us flex this muscle. We believe that Jesus' command to serve, his invitation that greatness comes through serving, is not just something academic. We actually want to put this into practice. So once a year what we do is we shutter our doors and we take church and we take it out to our community and we serve. We practice this value. You can serve. There's 1,400 people who are going to be, 1,500 people maybe, that are going to be serving to serve at 20 different service projects across the city. We're not going to be here next week at this campus. We're going to be somewhere else. We're going to be serving at these 20 different projects. And you can participate. We'd love to have you sign up. If you come here, no one's going to be here because we're going to be out at these service projects. Also, I just want to say this. Some of you are like, well, some of that stuff is, I'm physically incapable. I don't know if I can help. I don't know if you have anything for me. Some of you might have young kids and you'd be like, I don't know what to do. I've got a 4-year-old. They're not really going to be helpful. And you're right. But we have projects for little kids. And your little kids can learn how to serve. And you might have to come up behind them and clean up, but they're still learning. Do you see? They're still learning. So if you've got little kids, we've got projects for little kids. And if you've got some sort of infirmity or you think, I don't know if I can really help, just contact us. I promise we need people to pray. We need people to sit out here on Sunday morning. So if people come to say, hey, here's where we are, there's all sorts of ways. Just get in touch with us. Everyone can serve. Everyone can serve. Everyone can serve. Everyone can serve, which means that anyone can be great in the kingdom of God. Of course, it's not just one day, is it? So I'm going to leave with another question. Think about someone you can serve with intentionality and forethought and care in a way that costs you. Beautiful Day is one day, and it's beautiful. We serve our city. But if I were teaching a bunch of high schoolers, I would say, think about your family. How can you serve them? How can you serve your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters? Who can you serve? I would have them think about their family of origin and serve there. And for many of you, that's probably where this service energy might go to. How can you serve your spouse, your kids, your roommates, your friends that live? It might be somebody else. It might be somebody from work, whatever. Let God speak that. I'm going to close with Jesus' words. Jesus called them together. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.